Navi Micha is one of the shorter haftaras, but it is an enormously powerful haftara, and it truly has haftaras of relevance to us in our times, but this one literally could be written today. The Navi Micha is one of four prophets who lived during the same period of time: Amos, Hosea, Micha, and Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu is the most noted, so to speak, because we have a much longer book that he wrote, and his chapters comprise a large proportion of the haftaras of the year. But the Navi Micha, who was his contemporary, is also noted for the style, the linguistic beauty, the phraseology, and the genius that's involved here, together with his prophetic vision. The Parsha of Balak, which deals really with Bilam more than with Balak, gives us an opportunity, a rare opportunity, to see the Jewish people through non-Jewish eyes, and to do it in a way that is revealing, and in a way that does not immediately raise our hackles or build up our defenses. It's very hard to see anything through anybody else's eyes, to hear anybody else's opinion once I've made up my own opinion. And it especially is difficult to understand or to have any appreciation of how the non-Jewish world views us. In our time, it's become almost an impossibility because of the burden of history which we bear, the burden of thousands of years of persecution, of all of the bigotry and the enmity of the world towards us. It's very hard to listen to whatever the world has to say regarding us. And I don't say that's a failing of ours, it just is, that's just the way it is. But at the beginning of the history of the Jewish people, when they were still in the desert, so the Ribono Shel Olam sent them a prophet from amidst the nations of the world, the prophet being Bilam, who in prophecy was the equal, our rabbis tell us, on the same scale, let us say, as Moshe. It says in the Torah, Lakom Yisrael Kamoshe Od. Did not arise amongst the Jewish people another prophet, the equal of Moshe. So rabbis say, Yisrael Lakom. Amongst the Jewish people there was no such prophet. But amongst the nations of the world there was someone who could have been of that stature, and that person was Bilam. Bilam, however, unlike Moshe, had no moral inhibitions. The prophecy that he had was a gift, like someone is a great scientist or a great engineer or a great musician. That doesn't make him a role model, it doesn't make him a fine person, it doesn't make him anything. It makes him a person who has that particular skill or talent. Unfortunately, in life, most people who have one particular talent or skill which is given them by God, usually because of their greatness and that skill, misuse their lives, abuse themselves, do things that are really immoral to themselves and to others. Current sports heroes, political figures, men of great wealth are always examples of that tendency. And Bilam was the prime example, because Bilam is unspeakably immoral. He's a gun for hire. For a fee, he'll tell you what God has to say. And his own personal life is a shambles. And yet, he is the person that the Ribono Shel Olam chose to give us a window into the thinking of the non-Jewish world regarding the Jewish people, and to point out certain paradoxes which we see today. Bilam is full of admiration and hate, all wrapped into one. Bilam says the Jewish people are the greatest. Tomos nafshi, mos yeshorim, I would like to die. I would like at the end of my life that it should be said about me what it's said about the Jewish people. I see them at the end of days, how they have survived everything. But Bilam is not above cursing them. He's not above hating them. He's not above giving advice that will cost tens of thousands of Jews their lives. So this paradoxical view of the Jewish people is a window into the non-Jewish world and its relationship and its attitude towards the Jewish people. The same people who can sing hymns of praises towards the Bible and the moral contributions of the Jewish people can condemn individual Jews to death simply because of the fact that they're Jewish. And there is no contradiction in that. That's a very, very difficult thing to understand, but it's prevalent, and it exists today as well. It's not at all strange to us. So in the Haftara, Micha also presents a picture of the Jewish people which is paradoxical. How the world looks at the Jewish people. How the world will look at the Jewish people at the end of days. Not at the time of Bilam, when the Jewish people were just starting out. So there, Bilam speaks out of fear. Bilam speaks out of resentment. The young upstart people. But what will be 3,000 years later? What will be at the end of days? How will the world react? What will it be in the time of the Mashiach? And that Micha speaks about. The remnant of the Jewish people. The Jewish people who survived all of the long tzaras. The ultimate compliment that the Jewish people will be able to pay to themselves is that they survived, is that they're here. And that's inherent in the word She'eris Yaakov, the remnant of Yaakov. There's only a remnant left. Small percentage that has survived. The vast majority are all gone. They're gone because of the persecution and the assimilation. They're just gone. They're not here. I often quoted the startling statistic that the Jewish people today, in 1919 years after the destruction of the temple, have relatively the same population in absolute numbers that they had then. Then it was about close to 12 million Jews in the world, and today there's probably, according to the best estimates, about 13.5 million people in the world, Jews in the world. But if you want to think of it in relative terms, you have to think that at that time, 1900 years ago, our best estimates are that there were about 1.5 million Chinese in the world. Today there are 1,250,000,000. One out of every 4 people on this globe is Chinese. And so that mind-boggling statistic gives us an understanding of what the price of the exile has been in raw terms, just in terms of people. And the Jewish people were never notorious for having small families, etc. It's just that the price that has been exacted is so enormous that the words of the Torah, Ki atem ha'ma'at mikol ha'amim, you are the smallest of all nations, has been fulfilled literally. The Jewish people really experienced very little growth. The only great growth that we had was in the 19th century, where the Jewish people doubled itself, and a little more than doubled itself in that century. And before World War II, we were approximately 18 million people. And then Hitler took off 6 million in one fell swoop. And then you have the communists in Russia and what happened in the Arab countries. And then you have the devastating rate of assimilation, where the United States alone, it's estimated that 1 million Jews have disappeared over the last 30 years. Just disappeared. And you'll combine that with a very small, low rate of reproduction, having children, and the statistics are depressing. So that's why we're called She'eris Yaakov. The Jewish people somehow have survived, but it's only a She'eris, it's only a remnant, only a small fraction of who could be here, or who should be here. We just are a very small number. Now, the world doesn't see us that way. The world sees us as being much more numerous, much more powerful. Hitler and all of his craziness was not alone in believing that the Jews controlled the world, and that the Jews could make the war, turn off the war, turn it off, do whatever they wanted. If you read the account of the transaction that Eichmann and Himmler wanted to have with the Jews in Hungary, in which they wanted 10,000 trucks traded for the release of 500,000 Hungarian Jews, and they sent emissaries, and they were dead serious. They thought that the Jewish world could produce one, that the Jewish world had the ability to tell Roosevelt and Churchill to send them 10,000 trucks. Whereas the Jewish world in World War II had almost no power whatsoever, no leverage on anyone, and therefore that's why we accomplished as little as we accomplished. Couldn't do a thing. But in the eyes of the non-Jewish world, the Jews were and are all powerful, and they are very, very numerous. When Jackie and I were in Norway, so we were on a bus tour of Norway, and so on that bus, which had 42 seats, so there were 26 Israelis, which can be a daunting experience. And we were on the bus, and there were about 30 Jews on the bus visiting the fjords of Norway. And there were two very nice waspy couples from Rancho Verde, California, outside of San Diego, who were living in $500,000 condominiums on the 7th hole of the golf course there. And they went, they were retired, they saved up all their lives to go to Norway, and they end up with the 26 Israelis speaking Hebrew next door to them. And the Israelis are not necessarily quiet people. And by the 5th day, so when we stopped somewhere to see some magnificent sight, so one of the men from Rancho Verde, he said to me, "You're a rabbi?" Because they told him, "I'm a rabbi," and such. He said, "Yeah." So he said to me, "Hey, can I ask you?" He said, "How many Jews are there in America?" So I was getting ready to answer him, I was going to answer 4.5 million, 5 million. But before I could get the answer out, he said, "It must be 40, 50 million. And I looked at him, he was absolutely dead serious. Because the Jews are 10% of the Senate, they're 10% of the House, and in the media and in everything else. So go tell them, you can't get $1 million from Mincha Myers. Tell them that there's nobody home, there's nobody here. That there probably are as many Native Americans, which we used to call Indians. But that's the non-Jewish perception of the Jew, is that he is all powerful and all numerous. And the Jewish perception, the Jews knowing how weak they are, then the Jewish perception is that we're only a remnant, a survivor. Well, that automatically, the disagreement on the basic fact of how to view the Jewish people automatically makes different attitudes. Because if we view ourselves as survivors, then we say we're entitled to sympathy. We're entitled to compensation. We're entitled to a special place. And if they view us as being so numerous and powerful, then we're pushing. We're pushing our way to the head of the line for no reason. Why would we have everything that we want? How can it not be? And that's part of the misunderstanding regarding the state of Israel. Regarding anything Jewish, that's one of the roots of the misunderstanding. When really there's almost no amount of education that can change that perception. So to us, that's She'eris Yaakov, the remnant of Jacob. The Keren amim rabim, and we are in the midst of many nations. Ketal me'es Hashem, we will survive like dew from God. One of the miracles. It will be a blessing, like the dew from the Ribono Shel Olam. Kirvivim ale'esai, like the showers of rain, the drops of rain that fall on the grass. Asher lo yikav ish, that they do not hope for any man, neither dew nor rain come from man. They don't need any human being. We don't need any help from the outside world. Nobody has to help us. No need anyone's favors. We will not hope unto any man that somebody is going to come and save us and help us. But one perception of a Jew here is, and this is how we view ourselves again, in the paradox, is that we are dew and rain. We're soft. We're productive. We are the necessary ingredient in order that the world should grow and be successful. And now comes the second view. And the Jews are both together. So one view is that's how the Jewish people will reach the end of the exile. Soft, good, like rain, like dew, that comes to nurture the parched fields, the dry grass. And independent, it doesn't have to hope for anyone. It's not dependent upon anyone's bounty or goodness. We don't need anyone. So the second view of the Jewish people, that the Jewish people, the remnant of the Jewish people amongst the nations of the world, Bekerev amim rabim, again, this exact same phrase that we saw in the previous pasuk, amidst many nations. And so amidst many nations means scattered amongst many nations, and also means surrounded by many nations. Not all of whom are our friends. So then the Jew will be ke'aryeh bebahamos yar. He will be like a lion tearing the beasts of the field, the beasts of the forest. Kichvir be'edrei tzon, like a young lion that falls into the sheepcote, tears the sheep apart. Asher yihovar v'romas v'torah, that if he comes by and he uses his feet, he tramples, because the lion kills not only with its teeth, it kills with its claws. The Torah, and it tears its prey apart. Ve'ein matzil, no one can save from once the lion has gotten a hold of its prey, there is no way that it will ever be saved. That's how the Jewish people will be in the midst of nations. It will be a roaring lion. It will be strong, and it will be violent, and it will tear it apart. So, here you have two views of the Jewish people at the end of the day, both of which we see exist. Both of which sometimes are combined in the same people and in the same person. And that's the paradox of what the exile has done for us. It's also a description of what is necessary at the end of days. To survive to the end of days, you cannot be a soft people. That's why the Jewish people are what they are, with all our warts and problems. But if we were a soft people, we would not be here. The Jewish people are hard people. They're hard to govern, hard to lead, hard to argue with. They're tough. If you have any doubt, white wine in any place in the state of Israel. Get wine. But that's again, because we're all survivors. And therefore, that's the paradox here, the inexplicable paradox, that we are one and the same time soft as rain, and on the other hand, we are as violent and as destructive as the lion. Torah Yod Chal Tzarech Zorecha, God says. The end of days, you will raise up your hand against your enemies, against your oppressors, once and for all. You won't be the patsy anymore. You won't take it. And your enemies will be cut down. The viewpoint always of the period of time that leads to the Mashiach, that viewpoint has always been that that it's not a peaceful time. It doesn't come easily. It doesn't come peacefully. And that it has a violence almost as its handmaid. Now that disturbs our sensitivities, and we would prefer it a different way, perhaps. It's not perhaps, certainly. But any reading of Tanakh shows that that's almost wishful thinking. But certainly whatever we have, the little that we have in the world today, in our little state, etc., is achieved only through violence. Achieved over all enemies and at a terrible violent cost. So that's Torum Yodchal Tzarecha, to raise your hand over your enemies. And all of your enemies will be cut down. So it's as though God says that you'll have to raise your hand. You'll have to do it. On the day that these things will finally occur, so God says there will finally come a time, this is the way Rashi and the other Meforshim learned, that after the violence there finally will come a time of peace. After you have asserted yourself, so to speak. I will cut away, I will remove your horses from your midst. Horses here is a phrase, a word, which means horses of war, chariots of war. You won't need tanks anymore. There'll come a time when that will not be necessary anymore. And your chariots will no longer be part of you. They'll be cut away. You just won't have to do it anymore. The weaponry will no longer be your forte. It's ironic that in the world today, the Hebrew word that is probably the most known word in the world is Uzi. And that in terms of weaponry, Israel's major export are arms, technical, sophisticated arms, missiles, smart bombs, things such as that. So God says, even though you needed it, there'll come a day you won't need it anymore. And you won't need Arei Artsecha, meaning the large fortified cities. You won't need the major defenses anymore. The Harasti Kol Nifzarecha, and all of your turrets and all of your towers will be able to be raised, will be able to be torn down. Peace will break out. But together with that, there has to come an inner strength. Because if the inner strength is not there, then the peace will be illusory. There has to be a spiritual strength with you. Even Navi Zechariah says the same thing, that he says Jerusalem will sit, Trozos Teisha of Yerushalayim, Jerusalem will sit in tranquility, and the Rabboni Shalom will be our protector. God says, I will knock down the chshafim. So the word chshafim literally here means magical tools. But in our times, we could certainly translate it as sophisticated weaponry. But what you are confident in. That has been, in the ancient world, they used the sorcerer's tools to inspire confidence that their soldiers were going to win, that this was the propitious moment or propitious hour to strike, that they couldn't lose if it happened at this and this time. All of that went into chshofim. So in our time also, the chshofim are, it's not just the astrological statement, but it is what you rely on. U'ma'onanim lo yiyulach. No, ma'onanim are people who are soothsayers, who predict. They predict when is a good time, what's going to happen. Today we call them stockbrokers. But the ma'onanim, the soothsayers, the predictors, you will have no recourse to them. You will not have to use them anymore. They won't have anything to say for you or to you, because you'll be past that. I will destroy your idols and your statuary, the things that have been dedicated to paganism, to idolatry. So that is, relatively speaking, primitive idolatry. Primitive paganism was to bow to a statue. But the second half of the pasuk, you will no longer bow down to the works of your hands. That's already sophisticated idolatry, because the works of your hands need not be any more idols. It is anything that man accomplishes, anything that man does, and he worships himself through that, whether it be false patriotism, whether it be the accomplishments of his business, whether it be any accomplishment. That it's what man has done. He bows to that, so then that's a form of sophisticated idolatry. To serve man's creations as though it was connected with God itself. The word Asherah always meant a tree that was sanctified for Avodah Zarah, that was sanctified for paganism. I will rip up again those trees, those idols that you have set aside, that have been in your midst for generations and centuries. So in our time, the sophisticated paganism is a secularism which has invaded the Jewish world and taken over much of it. And the false gods, the false ideologies that have destroyed hundreds of thousands, not millions of Jews. So the word Orecha here is a difficult word. Many say Orecha means cities, and it's talking about cities that were devoted to Avodah Zarah, or cities in which there was no Jewish life in the city, and therefore the city dies by itself. It is destroyed. It's destroyed by crime, by corruption, by all of the things that always accompany eventually the immorality and the destruction of values. Others say Orecha is like Orecha, meaning your forests. And the forest there means the place where the trees were cut down, where they got these trees for the idols. And the Navi says, I will destroy them, that you will no longer build these types of enormous idols or trees to worship, but that your forest will be cut down. God says, and at the end of days, the world is not without retribution. Scores scores will be settled. And the scores are settled not necessarily by man. God settles them. I shall, with my anger, be'afu b'chema. With my anger, I shall settle Nokom, to take revenge, to settle the score, Bagoyim, with all the nations. Asher lo shomeyu, who did not listen to me, who did not hearken to the voice of morality, who behaved as they have behaved throughout world history. God says at the end of days, their punishment, their retribution will be clear. The Meforshim again point out to us that what the Navi is talking about here are also natural disasters. The disaster that happened in Russian Armenia, I cannot explain it in any way, but something is going on. There's a reason for it. So again, if we would be privy to God's view of the world and of history, we would see what it is. But it certainly is something. By the way, I hung it up in the yeshiva. The earthquake in Armenia is mentioned in the Targum Yonason, in the 4th chapter of Eicha, that at the end of days, the cities of Armenia will be overturned. What they had against Armenia, I don't know, but he seems to say that Armenia is Esav. In any event, I always say that it's like we live in it's like you go, somebody that doesn't know anything about baseball, nothing, zero. And he goes to the ball game, and he comes in the middle of the 3rd inning, and he doesn't have a program or a scorecard, and he stays to the 5th inning, and then he walks out. And then somebody asks him to write a review of, what does he think of the great American pastime? Right? So that's pretty much akin to the situation that we find ourselves in. Came in the middle of the game, we don't know the rules, we don't understand anything, everybody's hollering, it's a big crowd, and we leave early, nobody ever bothered to explain it to us, but we all write, a sports column, we all say, this is what happened. When in reality, we haven't got a clue as to what's happening. If you want to feel, good isn't the word, but if you want to feel somewhat relieved about the situation in the world and how experts are wrong, I'm just reading William Manchester's biography of Winston Churchill, especially the period of time in the 1930s. And he quotes there from the New York Times and from the Times of London extensively what they said about Hitler from 1930, let's say, to 1939, that almost that complete decade. And it's just mind-boggling until you stop and see what they say about Arafat and what they say about it. You can just make it up all over again. Hitler, he doesn't mean it, he's really good, and it's going to be good for the world and good for Germany. Walter Lippmann, who was Jewish, said that the excesses against the Jews are not nice, he says, but they're understandable, and it's good for Germany to get it out of its system. He's sitting in New York, and he says it's good for Germany to get it. Walter Lippmann. So if you read all of that, I don't know, you're not any wiser, but I really am not, I couldn't care less what the New York Times has to say about anything. Or what anybody has to say, because that's the exact comparison. You come in the middle of the 3rd inning, and you don't know what ball game you're watching, and you don't have a clue. And God is like the New York Yankees. The ball players do not wear their names on the backs of the uniforms, so you really don't know anything. Now, the Navi here turns to the Jewish people. And these 8 psukim, which are the concluding psukim of the Haftara, are some of the most powerful psukim in Tanakh. Again, the Navi minces no words. Shimonu es Hashem Omer. Listen to me. Let's listen to what God says. The Navi says, enough, I heard everything that you have to say. Now, what does God have to say? Let's listen to what God has to say for a change. What does God say about us? Come, let us argue in front of the mountains. Why in front of the mountains? Because they've been here from time immemorial. Let's pick out witnesses that are here from the beginning. Moshe said, Hazinu Hashamayim, Sishma Oretz. We have to go back to the beginning of time. V'sishmano hagvos kolecha. Let the hills hear what you have to say. Come, argue with me. Tell me. God said, you tell me what's wrong, what I have done wrong. Shimu horim esriv Hashem. Let the mountains hear and judge the quarrel of God with his people. Let's listen. Is God right? In other words, God calls us to a din Torah. God calls us to judgment. We'll say what we have to say, and God will say what he has to say. Now, in Jewish tradition, a din Torah with God is not only permissible, but there are many great Jews who have called God to a din Torah. The most famous one probably is Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, and Jan Pierce made a record of it, which is world famous. Immortalized the Barditchever's din Torah with the Rabboni Shalom. But you're allowed to take God to a din Torah, but he's allowed to take us too. And who does he take? That the din Torah is before the universe, before the nature which is never changing. Well, a sonim, most oretz. A sonim here means the mountains, strong ones. Most oretz, the foundations of the earth. The mountains, the majestic mountains that have been here from the beginning. Let them testify. Let's talk in front of them. Let's see what they have to say. Ki riv la Hashem imamo. God has a quarrel with his people. In Yisrael yizvakoch, and God wants to debate the people of Israel. How does God do that? Well, he gains your attention. He puts you into a situation where you have to talk to him, because most of the time we don't want to talk to him. Just like most of the time we don't want to go to din Torah. So there are numerous ways of escaping that. Stalling it. So too, we are looking to stall. We don't want to talk to God. One of the ironies of life is that a person can be very observant and do everything the Torah tells him, but never for one moment think about God. Actually think about it. And it's important once in a while to think about it. It changes a person's direction in life. It does things for us. So, since most people don't want to have anything to do with him, so God has to gain our attention. He gains our attention, so then we have to talk to him. Usually, though, it's not under the most pleasant of circumstances. That's the problem. I am fascinated. There's a book on the universe by a man called Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking, the book is called The Beginnings of Time. And Stephen Hawking is someone who suffers from Lou Gehrig's disease, a Nobel Prize physicist, an absolute genius. The picture of him on the dust jacket of the book, he looks literally like an E.T. He looks horrid, which is from that terrible disease. And inside that nothing body is this mind. That's the lesson itself, is the mind that encompasses the universe. And someone developed a voice synthesizer. He can't write, he can't talk, but there's a computer, a voice synthesizer in his larynx, and when he breathes, so that the words come out, and this computer prints it out. And that's how he wrote this book. It's just, not only is the book amazing, the book is the triumph of the human spirit. But he has a book about the universe, in which he asks all the questions. How did it begin? Where did it begin? And in the foreword, he says, this is a book about God. And all of physics today is only about God. So it's interesting that in our time, the philosophers don't speak about God. The theologians really don't speak about God. The social scientists certainly never speak about God. The rabbis rarely speak about God. But the physicists, they speak about God. They are trying to, they wrestle with the problem. This is a book in theology. even though it's physics made relatively simple. I say relatively simple because even the great Rabbi Wein has to read certain pages 3-4 times to figure it out. I can't. There's certain pages I haven't figured out yet, but we can't read Hebrew, so we're even. But he has there a command of the basic laws of physics as we know them now, and the fact that the laws don't agree. The laws are, so to speak, self-contradictory. And he's looking for the unified theory which would explain the universe, and he can't find it. And that's the description of God. That's what he's trying to do. But the genius of the book in understanding these matters. So he's talking about God, and he himself says in the foreword that if it wouldn't be for his condition, he started to write, he's been sick this way for over 20 years. That when he was taking his PhD in Oxford or in Cambridge, I forget where, he has the chair in Oxford, the professorship that Sir Isaac Newton had. So he says that the doctors told him he had less than 2 years to live. So he decided that he would think about something that was noble, right? He wouldn't fritter away to 2 years. So he's been thinking about this for 26 years. This is the product of 26 years. A woman married him, and he has children. It's an amazing, he is an amazing story. But the book itself, if you have a chance to read it, it's a book that will strengthen your faith in man and in God. The beginnings of time. So that's what the Novi says here. God says, I want to talk to you. Let's talk. Let's discuss it. God says, what did I do to you? Why do you have such complaints? What did I do to you? Why did you forsake me? It's almost a marital counseling session. How did I tire you out? Why did you get bored with me? Why did you go looking for other things? How come you got tired of the Torah and you went to look for other things? Anavi, answer me. Answer me. Do you find anything better? It's the same idea that we saw in the haftara from Hosea, where she went and had all sorts of different lovers, and then she came back to her husband. She said, well, all the others, they're no good compared to you. So that's what God says here too. Anavi, answer me, tell me. Did I not take you out from the land of Egypt? You're a special people. And I redeemed you from the house of slavery. And I gave you special people to lead you. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, the family of the Jewish people, the family of Levi, the family of Amram and Yocheved, the two brothers and the sister. Moshe, who taught us the Torah, Aaron, who brought forgiveness and love and concern to the Jewish people and made it part of our life, Miriam, who was the leader of the women, who built the family of Israel. So they're the three role models, the three archetypes of the Jewish people. Ami, remember that this didn't start now, which is the hardest thing to remember, because we feel every problem is new. Not only new, but that whatever went on before is irrelevant. It really doesn't speak to us, whether it be personal experience, whether it be national experience. Remember. A person could only remember. Ma Yoatz Balak Melech Moav. What was the idea? What was the advice? What was the idea? The plan. Yoatz here is the plan, the conspiracy of Balak, the king of Moab, to destroy you. From the beginning of time, the world has been here to destroy you. Why are you so surprised? And what did Bilam answer him? Bilam, who was the height of intellectual attainment in the world. You have to read that book called Hitler's Doctors, in which he has the list of all the doctors that worked for the SS. It's just the highest honors at all the German medical universities. People that were heads of departments. One guy was the head of the department in Harvard, and he went back to Germany. people who took the Hippocratic Oath and who became sadists, murderers, killed children. That's Bilam. So what did he answer him? This is going on from Shittim, from the time of Bilam, Aragilgal, till our time, till the time that of Shaul HaMelech and David, and the time that we're here in Eretz Yisrael. It hasn't changed. The Navi says it hasn't changed in 1,000 years, and we can say it hasn't changed in 2,500 years. L'man das tzidkas Hashem. Remember, so that you'll understand God's righteousness. You'll understand what's involved here. What a dangerous world it is. God's righteousness and goodness that we have survived, that we're here somehow. Tzidkas Hashem is like Yeshuos Hashem, the salvation of God. How God has delivered us. Thought of this today. They now reveal that the Japanese have 50 of their workers, their Mitsubishi, in case you want to buy their cars. Mitsubishi's got 50 of their workers in Libya making the pharmaceutical plant for our cousin, Colonel Gaddafi. Right? And the Germans, nothing changed. Nothing changed in 40, 50 years. All the same. So that's what God says. Chorna, remember. If you'd only remember, then you'd be able to deal with it. Amor Akadem Hashem. Great pasuk. What shall I come to God with? Akadem means to come forth, to come forth to greet you, to meet you. What should I bring? So you have a problem, you're going invited somewhere. You have to bring the person a gift. What do you give someone who has everything? How shall I come forth to meet God? Ikaf, how will I exhibit my contriteness, my service, lelokei morom, to the God on high? What can I do to God? How can I show him? The Navi says, how can I show him that I'm his servant? What can man do? What can the Jewish people do? Ha'akadmenu ba'olos. Shall I bring him many sacrifices, animal sacrifices? Because the psychology in the time of the temple was that if you brought a nice sacrifice to the Beis HaMikdash, then you took care of God. Then you can, then everything else was, you could do whatever you want. And one of the weaknesses that the Nevi'im point out in the temple worship was that attitude. Just as we have that weakness today also, that people think that if they're charitable or if they're outwardly pious or whatever words we want to use to describe an officious type of piety, smug, self-righteous piety, that they've got God in their pocket. So is that, the Navi says, is that what you think God likes that? There's a famous story from the Kotzker, who was one tough Jew. And was a great Jew, in the highest form of greatness. I mean, he doesn't need my approbation. So there was a chassid that used to daven in a public manner that showed how much kavana, how much great intent he had to serve God. And he would daven long and loud and public. So the Kotzker once said to him, he says, in heaven, you know what they say when you start to daven? So he said, no, Rabbi, tell me. He says, the nudnik is here again. In heaven, you're a nudnik. God isn't interested in that. God has a deeper view of a person. And the Navi's going to say it here. After the Navi's done, so there's nothing that we can say. Ma'agolim b'nei shana. What are you going to bring? Fat calves, 1 year old. Then you think, oh, God's going to be impressed. Look at the good calf I got for him. Is that what God wants from you? Hayirtze Hashem ba'alfei elim. Does God want thousands of rams? That's what God needs. Berivavos nachalei shomen. with 10,000 rivers of fat that flow off the Mizbeach. Or the alternate pshat is the shomen is olive oil that was brought for the Korban Mincha, that was mixed with the flour. Is that what God wants? Is that what God needs? Is that your definition of God? Hete b'chori pishi. Is it enough to give my b'chor, my firstborn? So most Mepharshim say that the firstborn here refers to the firstborn of his animals, right? The b'chor, which was the most important and the most expensive and the best animal. I give that for my pishi, for my sin, right? I bought God off. I sinned, so I paid him. I brought him a sacrifice. Is that all right? And we're even. Is that how God works? Privitni, my children, chatas nafshi, that forgives me. There are people who take it out on their children. That's what they know. There are people who do, right? That they can sin forever, but the kids got to go to the, kids got to behave. Rarely in life does that work. My sin, as I offer up my child for my sin, you think that God likes that? You think that God will respond to that? That has meaning to him? Higid l'cha adam atov. God has told you, or God will tell you, or is telling you. Matov, what's good? I'll tell you. I'll give you a definition of what good is. Mo Hashem doresh mimcha. What does God ask of you? What is he looking for? Ki im asos mishpat. What does God want? He wants only that you should do justice. You should do what's right. And a person knows deep down in his or her heart what's right. Should do what's right. What's mishpat? Ve'avas chesed, and to love goodness, kindness, to love other people, to be decent to others. Chafetz Chaim wrote a whole sefer called Avas Chesed, which is a sefer of an attitude that a person should have towards life. An attitude towards life. Hatznei aleches im Elokecha. Hatznei aleches is to walk with your God, and it's translated humbly. But hatznei aleches is to walk with tznius, with modesty, with privacy, understated, without any smugness. And that refers to how man behaves with man and how man behaves with God. How to be a tzonua. How to do it in a way that is modest in the most positive sense of the word modesty. So that's what God wants. So it looks simple, but it's hard as blazes. But that's the definition of the goal of the Torah. The goal of the Torah is to make a person that does the right thing and that he likes to do good, kindness, that he loves doing it. Like you love cheesecake. You love doing chesed. And you want to walk with God, but you want to walk humbly with him. You don't want to say, look who I'm walking with. So that combination, that's the combination that brings to the redemption of the individual and the redemption of Israel. And that's the picture of Israel at the end of days. After everything has happened to us, so then we will somehow resemble that picture and be able to see to it that our lives and the life of the Jewish people generally conform to that idea of godliness.